Russell Brand. The answer to the question, look, I know we all dropped the ball with Jimmy Savile, but can you honestly name one other person we might have missed? You might recognise him from that Big Brother show, or the movie with the guy. Maybe you recognise him as the guy that dresses like a DMT messiah sent from Tucker Carlson's Wet Dreams to tell us the truth about vaccines. Despite starting his career looking a bit like a Temu Vince Noir that's been fucked against an electric fence, he's done bloody well to carve out a space for himself as another right-wing podcast-owning centrist in the American political discourse. Today, we're going to take a look at the life and times of Russell Brand and find out how he went from crack-addicted video jockey to Christ-addicted knob jockey. Yes, I'm proud of that line, like and subscribe. Russell was born in Essex in 1975. His mum and dad split up when he was a baby, so he lived with his mum, who was diagnosed with several types of cancer throughout his teens. He also noted in his 2007 memoir that his relationship with his dad was a bit fucking weird, to be honest. He said that they weren't in regular contact and that he took young Russell to see prostitutes in Thailand and generally was the one to introduce him to porn from a young age. Truth be told, there's a lot to get to in this video, so I'm skimming over this a bit, but his dad really does seem like an irresponsible piece of shit human being. From showing his kid porn to failing to report Russell's alleged sexual assault at the hands of one of his friends, it's safe to say that I'd rather have been parented by Joseph Fritzl than this slaphead Cenobite-looking old cunt. Despite a bit of a rough go of it, Russell ended up getting accepted into the Italia Conti Academy, a sort of fancy drama school in Woking. While he was there, he found fulfillment on the stage, starring in Bugsy Malone and meeting soon-to-be celebrities. The only downside being that he was suffering from bulimia, was addicted to drugs, and had been accused multiple times by multiple people over the last couple of years of sexually assaulting them while at the school. Trust me, we will come back to that later. He was eventually kicked out after a year of drug abuse and low attendance, which, fair enough. In the year 2000, Russell scored a pretty sweet gig as a VJ with MTV. For the people that aren't old enough, cool enough to know what a VJ is, that's a video jockey. A bit like a DJ, but for video it's not important. It was his job to go around to nightclubs and gigs and capture footage and shit, which really is quite a handy gig if you're a drug-addicted, egomaniacal, narcissistic sex pest. He was eventually fired for coming into work the day after 9/11 dressed as Bin Laden, and also bringing his drug dealer into the studio. Again, fair enough. In 2004, he hit the big leagues when he started hosting Big Brother's Big Mouth. If you aren't familiar with Big Brother, it was a show in which you would watch people doing literally nothing at all while being locked in a Spy Kids looking ass 2002 ass Austin Powers ass looking house. Then Russell and his C-list celebrity mates would talk about it as if anybody actually gave a shit about anything they watched at all. Awful. Fucking awful. But the notoriety he gained for being a ruddy, outrageous British sex symbol was a huge element of what launched his career in the media. He starred in the 2007 comedy St. Trinians, in which he played a lovable, roguish and sexy British lad. In 2008, he broke out into the mainstream, starring in Forgetting Sarah Marshall, where he played a roguish and sexy British lad. Let's not forget 2010's Get Him to the Greek, where he played a roguish and sexy, but you get the point. The fact is, he established himself as an actor with a range somewhere between The Rock and Gal Gadot. The point I'm trying to make is that, despite being a bit of a cunt, Russell was working his way into the nation's heart for being the bad boy of daytime TV, exclusively watched by alcoholic and sexually frustrated women in their mid-40s on Sky Plus. You might be thinking, but geez, hasn't he been fired from pretty much everything he's ever done? How does he keep getting work? Which is a fair enough question, the answer to which is that being fired in the TV world is basically like having a PhD. He performed stand-up comedy for our wonderful blood overlords Liz and Phil, R.I.P., had his own radio show, podcasts, stand-up specials, you name it, he butchered it. Now, if you're in the UK, when you hear the name Russell Brand, you probably remember these early 2000s with him being just a bit of a cheeky chappy, a rapscallion, a mischief maker, an insufferable prick, if you will. His progression into the world of politics, however, was something that would happen over years of marches, protests, and parliamentary testimonies about his experience with drug addiction and rehabilitation. See, Russell has always been a bit of a revolutionary. If you're decrepit enough to remember the Occupy protests, Russell was one of the celebrities that supported the movement and did a lot to raise public awareness. It's easy to see why, too. He's engaging, charming, and says fancy long words that make me feel clever when I listen to him. He raised awareness for the cause, his ego was stroked by the cameras pointing in his direction, and the journalists got a headline. Everyone's a winner. He was featured on Newsnight, he wrote articles for the New Statesman, and he was killing the game, but there were just two minor flaws. 1, he had no idea what he was talking about, and 2, he had no idea what he was talking about. Now, I realise technically speaking that's only one flaw, but I think it was such a big one that it was worth mentioning twice. Let me give you an example. He appeared on Newsnight to have a bit of a chat with Evan Davis about his political beliefs and stuff. At one point, while he was doing his usual capitalism is evil thing, Evan brought up a graph that showed the changes in real terms wages over time. Russell then engaged panic mode and spieled about how he doesn't need graphs. Graphs are just things made by people like Evan to confuse people like him. To be fair, he might have had a point, because if he took 2 seconds to look at the fucking thing, he would have seen that the graphs supported his argument, that our current capitalist economic model has failed working class people, at least since 2014. Now, we've spoken before on the channel about the give and take between facts and rhetoric, and at the risk of sounding like a pro-gamer, Russell is a pure rhetoric build. He is untethered from reality and fueled almost entirely by his solipsistic belief that everyone around him is there to support the great pantomime that is Russell Brand's life. In layman's terms, he's all fart, no poo. In another Newsnight interview, this time with Jeremy Paxman, he encouraged young people not to vote, because if young people don't vote, the whole system will fall down. Right, Russell? It's all going to cave in and we'll have to abandon our mediocre two-party system. Right, Russell? There's no way that it would actually just hand more power over to the Conservative Party that will continue to exploit that capitalist system you hate. Would it, Russell, you fucking thick cunt? He rocks up, sticks a beret on and starts talking like he's Che fucking Guevara, and the media is absolutely lapping it up. Not because he has anything meaningful to say, of course, but because he's a recognisable name they could stick on the telly for half hour that will drive some viewership. Again, he gets to be famous and go on the telly and get paid, and the media get to point to this mental lefty bloke who thinks we should abandon democracy and revolt to overthrow Coca-Cola or whatever the fuck. Win-win, I suppose. Russell eventually came to the not totally incorrect conclusion that the mainstream media was a complete and total crock of piss-covered camel shit, and decided to go it alone and spread the word. The truth, one might say. And so, in 2014, he took to YouTube to launch the Trews, a regular news show that was different to all the others because it was telling you, dear viewer, the truth. You can tell because he wasn't in a bloody news studio, he was in his house. He isn't just some geezer in a suit reading off a prompter, he's some geezer in an unbuttoned shirt rambling a monologue that isn't held to any level of professional scrutiny by any sort of standards committee, which is, better, obviously. The Trews ran almost daily, and was really just an unfiltered glimpse into Russell Brand's assessment of the world of politics and the media. He would mock the left and the right, but there definitely was a bias against Fox News and the Murdoch-adjacent companies that spew complete and total unrelenting bollocks. But I don't think it's because Russell is necessarily left-wing. The left-wing media and politicians certainly looked at him as a bit of a darling, and he interviewed Ed Miliband while he was leader of the Labour Party, which was way ahead of its time, politicians speaking to alternative media, but I think it's best to categorise Russell as an anti-establishment revolutionary. He doesn't dislike the right specifically. He dislikes the centralisation of power and his perceived inequality between the asset class and ordinary people. It just so happened that the right was more representative of the establishment at the time. Bear this distinction in mind, he is specifically against the centralisation of power and the overreaching of governments and corporations. Looking back at it, it's clear that the show was a bit more surface level than we might have given him credit for at the time. When he talks about politicians on the show, he rarely talks about policy or what he would specifically endorse. He talks about how their candour and demeanour and presentation is in service to or betraying their alignment to a broader political establishment. A lot of the content is simply him reacting to Fox News segments or newspaper headlines, and he would just kind of chip in with some witty remarks, which again, way ahead of its time. He would make his anti-establishment bias known, but in a sort of rebellious teenager, all problems, no solutions sort of way. As I said earlier, at this point Russell seems to be much more interested in delineating at the point of class, rather than political preference. He disliked the Tories because of their shameless service to the rich at the detriment of the working class, and their allegiance to corporate interests rather than the interests of ordinary people. Now, I'll be clear, I think the Trews was at least an honest engagement with politics from the perspective of someone that was ultimately just a guy with some opinions having a bit of a go on the internet. I can't be mad at it from that perspective because it's exactly what I do, and the whole point of this channel is to show you that you can engage with politics without being a boring dickhead or an autistic debate streamer that spends 12 hours a day creating content like a loser nerd virgin. With that being said, he also couldn't have been accused of being too well researched either. His analysis was basically just vibes, and the same criticism can be levied against his current work. He is driven by populism, theatre, and engaging rhetoric. He's a preacher. And that's great if you agree with him, because all good preachers have a way of energizing you and convincing you that you're not the mental one, it's all the others. See, they just haven't opened their minds like you have. All those years of smoking weed, sniffing coke off your mate's car key in a club toilet, and taking mushrooms in the woods to open your third Jap's eye were all worth it, and definitely made you less fucking mental. The end of the Trews came on August 20th, 2015. In this video, he talks about how the American elections have thrown up some ridiculous characters like Donald Trump, but also have given some hope through candidates like Bernie Sanders. He talks about how he used to tell people not to vote, but now he believes that if you want to use your vote to support people like Jeremy Corbyn or Bernie Sanders, then you should do that. He also says that he's going to use his time after the Trews ends to go out into the real world, to learn and to grow as a person, because he believes that the real revolution, which he describes as a change of power, not using the conventional means of power, is still to come. And once it does come, he wants to be a part of it. So what happens when you take an anti-corporate, fact-retardant government skeptic who wants to see democratic rule overthrown in favour of the people and plonk them smack bang in the middle of a global pandemic navigated by Donald Trump? What happens to a man that, as we've already covered, is only interested in vibes and being vociferously anti-government, and a hopeless narcissist that can't survive for more than a year without being in the public eye? Well, apparently this.
Cancer which curiously appears to be on the rise among young people. Cancer which curiously appears to have metastasized itself into a new turbo version. Sometime around 2020, 2021. Did anything apocal happen around that time? Let me know in the comments and the chat. Be careful what you post. It's becoming a very censorial, invasive and authoritarian world.
While we're here, let me just nip this in the bud and foreshadow the next segment. Yes, early onset cancer is up, but despite Russell insinuating that this has been on the rise since around 2020-2021, it's actually been rising since 1990. In fact, it's up 79.1% globally and is impacted by geographical location, socio-demographics, and exposure to drinking, smoking, and dietary risk factors. But he doesn't pull any of that up on the screen like I'm doing as evidence of his truthfulness, because then he couldn't blame the vaccine. Better be careful posting about what you think in the comments, because it's becoming a very censorial world out there. They're coming to get you and force feed you turbo cancer. What a complete fucking cunt. Now, I'd like to do two things here. While I talk you through this next segment, I want to illustrate to you exactly how much of a centrist Russell has become. On screen right now is Russell's most recent videos, and we're going to scroll through his channel until we find a video that is, at least on the face of it, being critical of the political right wing. I've noticed that there does seem to be a drift of alternative media podcast bros that claim to be centrist, but also have never said anything at all critical about the right wing, and also vote for the right wing candidate. You know, your Joe Rogans, your Tom Bilyeu's, your Lex Friedmans, Sean Kelly's, all those guys. It shouldn't take too long, what with him being just a truth seeker that has no loyalty to either political wing, but just humour me while we crack on. The first video on his channel about COVID was pondering the impact of a virus that spreads by touch, limiting the interface with which we show affection and connection, and how he will be mindful and consider how he interacts with others around him. It was all a bit woo-woo bollocks, to be honest, but a sweet sentiment, I suppose, and pretty on brand, pun intended, since he was still in his hippie Yoko Ono We Are the World kind of phase. In his second video, posted just 3 days later, he comes to terms with the extremity of the situation and talks about how our current society isn't built on sound foundations. He talks about how experts in medical fields must be listened to, but we must also listen to ancient wisdom. He asks what the value is of commercial capitalism, despite sitting in front of a sixer of artisanal water in his last video, and claims that the real wisdom is that held by ancient civilizations. Nature is rising up, and it's proof that our systems aren't going to hold up forever. You know, if you ignore the fact that our systems held up. In a nutshell, when you put aside the intellectual masturbation around the Tao and ancient wisdom and all that bollocks, he was simply a guy that wants to use his platform to talk about how to keep your mind healthy during COVID. Again, a bit woo-woo for my taste, but nothing dodgy. As the first lockdowns began to lift and people speculated as to how we should return to normality, Russell had been slowly solidifying an opinion that we would need new ways of organising society without relying on, quote, the old systems and the old authorities to provide us with solutions. This is more of the ancient wisdom stuff he's spoken about since the Trews, but I think COVID and the suspension of our economic systems really ignited a sense of hope in Russell, that we would all just wake up and realise that we actually just wanted to live in communes and share fucking turnips and shit. December 3rd, 2020, he makes a video covering the pros and cons of the proposed vaccine rollout. He explicitly states that he has no opinion on whether or not you should or shouldn't take it. He says he has absolutely no medical qualifications to judge the efficacy of the vaccine, and once again focuses most of his concerns on handing over governments and corporations more power through mandatory vaccinations and legal immunity for companies like Pfizer. He singles out Donald Trump as somebody that's handing out millions of dollars in COVID contracts to his acquaintances, and how he believes that pandemic is also being used by politicians to enrich their already ultra-wealthy friends. October 23rd, 2021, Italy goes and introduces what they call green passes. These are documents that track your vaccination status and determine where you can go and when. They state that those that aren't vaccinated would be forced to take unpaid leave from work, regardless of whether or not you're a public or private worker. Employers would be responsible for checking your green pass, and you could be fined up to €1,500 if you're caught out. Now, this was obviously one of the stricter governmental responses to COVID, but it only added fuel to Russell's conviction that we need to push back hard against what he sees as a gross overstepping of the government. January 2022, Russell uploads a video called "They're putting COVID microchips where now? This is crazy!" Despite the obvious implication that vaccines are implanting microchips into your body, and that it is absolutely crazy for them to be doing so, the gist of the entire 13-minute video is that a Swedish company has invented microchips that can be scanned with a smart device to display basically any information you want it to. It's not COVID specific, you can link it to your security fob at work, or your LinkedIn, or your Pornhub favourites, whatever the fuck you want. There's absolutely fuck all of any note or concern here, but Russell seems to be selling it as if it were the introduction of some sort of Terminator, Orwellian Matrix dystopia or something. This is a fantastic exemplar of basically every video he's produced since 2022. He takes a simple fact that a company has invented an NFC chip that can be subdermally implanted, and tugs himself off for 15 minutes about how he reckons this will be immediately bought up and forced upon the entire Western world to track your vaccination status or something. Meanwhile, he's more than happy to call the most successful capitalist of all time, Elon Musk, the next messiah that will save humanity, while Elon is unironically developing chips that can be implanted into your brain to directly interact with your memories and cognition. Don't mind me, I'll just be slurping on the minuscule cock of the world's wealthiest man while talking about how the establishment is making your life worse because I'm a completely brain-dead pigeon fucker. February 2022, Russell publishes a video called "So, I'm right-wing now?", in which he covers how left-wing pundits and news personalities have labelled him one of Joe Rogan's many right-wing guests. This was around the time Joe was talking about how ivermectin was doing absolute bloody wonders treating his COVID, and Russell was, at the very least, not poo-pooing Joe's stupid bollocks. In May this year, Russell showed a clip of former CNN anchor Chris Cuomo admitting that he now takes a course of ivermectin to help with the effects of long COVID, and talks about how he, Russell, and others knew that ivermectin was effective the whole time, if only those bloody qualified doctors and pharmacists would have listened to them. Chris Cuomo, by the way, was fired from CNN for attempting to suppress sexual assault allegations made against his brother, and despite the fact that he reckons it helps, there is still absolutely zero clinical data that suggests that it is at all effective in managing the long-term effects of COVID. I'm sure if Russell actually did have any evidence beyond Chris Cuomo reckons it's decent, he would have put it up on his fucking screen as well, but he didn't. He put up a video of a man that looks like his blood pressure's higher than a pterodactyl's tits, as if he's the exemplar of a healthy individual. What I'm trying to get at is that COVID really did a number on Russell's ability to be taken seriously by those that believe in the efficacy of vaccines, who of course are predominantly left-wing. He encourages you to do your own research and to form an opinion based on facts rather than what the establishment, corporate media and pharmaceutical industry tells you. On the face of it, it doesn't seem like an entirely unreasonable thing to say either, but let me ask you. If I tell you to ignore what established and regulated news companies tell you, and to ignore the studies published by pharmaceutical companies that study the efficacy and safety of a vaccine, and to ignore what government health departments tell you to do, where do you end up? Where else can you look for information? Well, you end up in the lap of alternative news like Russell Brand's show, or InfoWars, or JRE, or God fucking help you, Vladimir Rubin. You might occasionally stumble upon somebody like David Pakman, or Carl Kalinsky, or Brian Tyler Cohen, but wait a second. They're referencing studies and government COVID statistics. Like I'm gonna believe these guys, they're just shills for the corporatocracy, man. The way this kind of conspiratorial thinking sneaks up on you is pernicious and deceptive, and probably is deserving of its own video to get into fully, but it's hard to recognize it in yourself, because it isn't necessarily about one conclusion or another. It's about how you arrive at that conclusion. The thought process itself is the problem, and people like Russell Brand, Tucker Carlson, Alex Jones, they know exactly what they're doing when they encourage this sort of thinking. Despite being a massive bellend with literally no fucking idea what the fuck he's even talking about, like a big stupid leather jacket wearing dickhead, Russell decided to ring in 2025 by uploading a video of himself talking to some bold twat about vaccines and how they might have a bit more autism in them than you might realise. Asterisk or not, who knows? In this video, he speaks to the aforementioned big bold idiot about how a whole bunch of studies state that there is not enough evidence to make the claim that vaccines do or don't cause autism. See? There's zero data to show that vaccines don't cause autism. Ha! Checkmate, liberals. I mean, let's not dwell on the fact that there's also zero data to show that vaccines cause hemorrhoids or stupid eyebrows or a completely shit taste in suits either. I was worried about adding this bit to the video for fear of making it seem disjointed and ruining the flow of the whole thing. Then I realised, I'm not Steven Spielberg, and so fuck it. Let's just get everyone up to speed on vaccines and autism, because apparently Russell can't seem to critically engage with any topic that might end up with him agreeing with the mainstream media. Let's be clear, it's not standard practice in medicine to arbitrarily test new treatments for every single possible side effect without cause. Notice how these two unbelievably thick wankers aren't pontificating about why there's no evidence that vaccines don't cause colour blindness, or itchy balls, or hairy balls, or smooth balls. That's because there is simply no reason to believe that vaccination is a contributing factor to the development of autism spectrum disorder. There's only one study that has showed a link between vaccines and autism, and it was so unbelievably corrupt that it was retracted by the journal that published it. The paper was called Ileal Lymphoid Nodular Hyperplasia, Nonspecific Colitis and Pervasive Developmental Disorder in Children, and it was authored by Andrew Wakefield. I know what you're thinking. Geez, is that the same Andrew Wakefield that lost his medical license because of evidence uncovered by Times journalist John Deere showing that he falsified results, misrepresented all 12 cases in the study, and failed to disclose the fact that he stood to gain tens of millions of pounds off the back of the results of this study? Not to mention that when nobody else could replicate his results and he was invited to either reproduce the study or retract it, he just refused to do either, and now makes a living grifting anti-vaxxers and still has failed to prove the results of his study were legitimate. How wonderful. I'm sure these are the actions of a man with nothing at all to hide. There are no credible medical experts that publicly assert a link between vaccines and autism, with the subsection being roughly equivalent to the subsection of furries that don't own body pillows of canonically underaged cartoon horses. What these two fuckos are doing is stoking the flames of anti-government conspiracies they feed off for consistent viewership, and therefore profits. If Russell gave a single shit about keeping you well informed on the facts, wherever they may fall, he wouldn't have been having this discussion without representation from anyone that can fairly and accurately represent the reasons why he's a complete fucking mongoloid. If I'd been paying attention, I'd be saying that he's doing the very thing that he criticised mainstream media companies of doing since he started the Trews. Don't let the chest hair and mysticism fool you. He's a partisan, multi-millionaire, news-reporting media personality that is feeding you utterly biased information being framed as fair reporting. He's doing nothing different to what Sean Hannity would do on Fox News when he would criticise him. In fact, he actually owns his media company and stands to gain far more from your viewership than Hannity ever did at Fox, so fuck it, he's worse. Now, if anybody wants a more full-on theatrical deep dive into this completely bullshido link between vaccines and autism, there's a link in the description to a video by a small up-and-comer called H-Bomber Guy. Go watch it. In a surprise move that absolutely nobody could have predicted, Russell decided to let Jesus take the wheel as he announced his newfound Christianity a few months back. That's right, just when you thought there couldn't be any more pieces of shit in the Thames, in May of 2024, Russell was dunked in the dysentery-infused river by one Bear Grylls, and just like that, he was forgiven by the Lord Jesus H. Christ. Unfortunately, Jesus wasn't one of the people accusing Russell of sexual assault, so it looks like he's still got some convincing to do. Oh, you didn't know about the allegations? Well, let me enlighten you. Pun intended. They're all intended. Before we get too deep, let me stress that these are allegations, and nothing has been proven as of yet. That being said, there is also no proof that ivermectin helps to treat COVID, and Russell seems to have no problem talking about that as if it were the absolute truth, so take it as you like. In September 2023, Channel 4 produced a Dispatches documentary about Russell called Russell Brand in Plain Sight. This was the culmination of about a year's worth of active investigations into Russell's behaviour by the Sunday Times, and details the stories of 4 women and how they claim to have been sexually assaulted by Russell. I really can't do a good job of distilling the depth and breadth of the investigation here, so I've linked both the documentary by Channel 4 and the publication from the Times in the description. Definitely go and check them out. They are extremely thorough and comprehensive pieces of work that deserve much more praise. These allegations are more than just unsubstantiated stories. They are, at least in parts, corroborated by Russell's own actions too. For example, in one case from 2012, a woman accuses Russell of raping her in his home in Los Angeles. Shortly after she fled, Russell sent the texts you can see on screen right now, apologising. The number has been confirmed to be his number at the time, and the victim has also been confirmed to have attended a rape treatment centre in Santa Monica the same day. She was also confirmed by journalists to have attended therapy for 5 months following the attack, with the notes specifically detailing the therapy she received as a result of rape. He's also alleged to have had a predatory relationship with a 16-year-old student while he was in his 30s. I should note, this isn't illegal in the UK, the age of consent is 16, but it is creepy and gross in the UK. He allegedly taught her how to lie to her parents so she could come and see him without them knowing, and she reports having to punch him during sex after he refused to stop a forced sexual act when she asked him to. This is a 16-year-old girl, mind. As she grew up, it became clear that he had groomed her. These stories, sadly, aren't unique. There are endless stories of showrunners with stories of him propositioning them for sex, or that he flashed them, or stories of women meeting him at events, going back to his place and claiming that he became aggressive and threatening towards them when they refused to have sex. Here's a clip from 2007 of our mate Russell chatting live on BBC Radio 2 with a man you might remember called Jimmy Savile.
It'd be very nice to meet you one day, Mr. Jimmy Savile, just, you know.
If you've got a sister, you could meet me by bringing her along.
I mean, I haven't got any sisters, but...
I don't usually meet fellas, but if you've got a sister, that's okay.
I've got a personal assistant called Marsha, and part of her job description is that anyone I demand she greets, meets, massages, she has to do it. She's very attractive, Jimmy.
Well, that's a good start.
What kind of
start? You could send her along to do some research.
Would you like her to wear anything in particular, Sir Jimmy?
I'd actually prefer her to wear nothing.
Right. So you want Marsha, my assistant, to meet you naked? Okay. Well, that's not going to be a problem.
Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with that, Jimmy. It's just
Danny Minogue, back in 2006, referred to him as a vile predator that doesn't take no for an answer. One victim recounts being sexually assaulted by Russell while his colleagues were outside and could hear her screaming. She recounts one of those men approaching her years later and apologising for not doing anything to help for fear of his livelihood. In 2014, his former girlfriend wrote in an autobiography about Russell sexually assaulting her. His ex-wife Katy Perry told Vogue in 2013, 2 years after he ended their marriage via text message, that he didn't like the atmosphere of me being the boss on tour. So that was really hurtful, and it was very controlling, which was upsetting. I felt a lot of responsibility for it ending, but then I found out the real truth, which I can't necessarily disclose because I keep it locked in my safe for a rainy day. Prominent UK comedians like Nish Kumar and Daniel Sloss have since also confirmed that Brand's actions were an open secret on the circuit, but the threat of legal action if somebody aired the allegations were enough to prevent any one person from coming forward without hard evidence. So, what was Russell's response when these investigations were released? Well, he took to his social media to post a video and, yeah, you guessed it, he blamed the mainstream media for orchestrating a conspiratorial attack on his character because he's skeptical about vaccines. Yeah, that'll do it, Russ, mate. Last we heard was in November 2024, where detectives investigating the allegations forwarded on a case file to the Crown Prosecution Service to consider bringing charges against him. Me personally? I think that the sheer number of anecdotes, experiences, and corroborating evidence are just too much to reject as an attack by mainstream media. I'm honestly not sure what that even means, but look at the stories, from producers to co-workers to interviewees to showrunners to audience members to 16-year-old fucking schoolgirls. The actual apologies sent to victims at the time that their assaults were alleged to have happened, apologising for mistreatment at 3 in the fucking morning, and telling them that they shouldn't need to get tested for an STI as a result. Then we have his acknowledgements of his drug abuse and its eventual evolution into sexual addiction. It's really pretty hard to just disregard this as just tabloid attacks, especially when Russell himself has come out with the square root of absolutely fuck all in response to it, except for, nah bruv. And especially since these allegations put media companies like the BBC and Channel 4 in the firing line for not acting on the allegations and internal complaints years earlier. Now, let me be clear, I'm open to having my mind changed in light of new evidence, but if you actually still believe Russell at this point, I'm going to have to ask you to stop huffing paint thinner and get a grip of your life. So, where is he now? Well, he's doing more of the same, really. He uploads approximately a video every single day between YouTube, Rumble, and probably InfoWars, and spews complete and unrelenting bollocks the entire time. His thumbnails are clickbait bullshit, and his video titles are clickbait bullshit, designed to lure in the conspiratorial-minded. This is deeply concerning. They didn't expect this. What no one noticed about Wicked. Okay, this one's actually really good. He spends 12 minutes reviewing Wicked despite never having seen Wicked. He just watches the trailer, talks about Jungian archetypes, and complains about wokeness, and if that's not a perfect encapsulation of everything this linen-wearing pseudo-Christian pigeon fucker stands for, then I don't know what is. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, please do like and subscribe, it really helps. A huge thank you to my enigmatic and flagrant supporters on Patreon and the members right here on YouTube. If you'd like to support, you can do so from just £1 a month by clicking on the link in the description, or you can press join right below this video. Your support genuinely means the world to me. Love you. Bye bye.